All right, let's dive right into this explainer. Today, we are conducting a forensic audit of one of the most, well, chilling anomalies ever uncovered in the declassified archives of the United States intelligence community. We're going to look closely at a sequence of events and mathematical models that could literally challenge everything we thought we knew about human history.
Take a look at this exact 27-character Central Intelligence Agency document number. Now, this isn't just any string of text. It represents a heavily sanitized 57-page file that was finally released to the public back in June of 2013, and that was only after some relentless Freedom of Information Act requests. Before that release, this document was completely locked away, totally inaccessible to the American public for nearly 50 years.
Which brings us to the golden question, right? Why on earth would a top-tier intelligence agency, smack in the middle of the Cold War, legally classify and aggressively suppress a geology book? Well, the source documents suggest that the intelligence apparatus intentionally buries the most terrifying geological assessments simply to maintain plausible deniability. Let's look at exactly who wrote this thing.
If we trace the timeline back to 1965, we find an aerospace engineer and former intelligence officer named Chan Thomas. He tried to publish a book called The Adam and Eve Story. Now, he was actually building on the geological theories of Charles Hapgood, whose ideas on Earth's shifting crust were explicitly endorsed in writing by Albert Einstein back in 1953. But when Thomas published his mathematical treatise on cyclical destruction, it triggered an immediate, utterly aggressive classification by the CIA in 1966.
Section 1, the Mathematics of Destruction, Crustal Displacement.
The source documents claim the real danger here wasn't in the history itself, but in the physics. Thomas mathematically modeled a recurring geophysical apocalypse known as crustal displacement. The sources say this theory posits that, driven by a severe breakdown in the Earth's magnetosphere and sudden solar anomalies, the entire outer lithosphere, that 30 to 50-mile thick solid crust that all our civilizations sit on, periodically detaches from the highly viscous asthenosphere right below it.
So the absolutely crucial point here is the supersonic math outlined in these 3 steps. When the crust's magnetic coupling to the inner mantle weakens and physically detaches, the solid landmasses violently shift thousands of miles in just a matter of hours. But the oceans, they do not immediately follow. They are governed by the absolute laws of inertia and the conservation of momentum.
And this creates a massive physics problem. See, the Earth rotates at the equator at a standard velocity of roughly 1,000 miles per hour. When that solid crust suddenly slips over the mantle, the hydrosphere, our oceans, obeying immense kinetic inertia, just keep moving at their previous equatorial velocity. We are talking about trillions of tons of water violently sloshing over the shifting continents at supersonic speeds.
According to the text, the kinetic result of this generates tsunamis literally miles high, slamming into landmasses at nearly 1,000 miles per hour, instantly annihilating all coastal civilizations. And mathematically, this maps perfectly to the sudden erasure of highly advanced pre-Diluvian civilizations, like the original architects of the Giza Plateau or Pumapunku, precisely during the Younger Dryas boundary around 11,600 to 12,800 years ago. It essentially offers a brutal explanation for the massive meltwater pulses and global flooding we see in the geological record.
Next up, the illusion of stability, the Gnostic reality.
Now, you might be wondering, why would the government even care about an event from 11,000 years ago? Well, the source claims the intelligence apparatus aggressively enforces a manufactured, linear narrative of human history. This idea that civilization is just a slow, uninterrupted climb from hunter-gatherers to modern society. They have to enforce this because admitting the alternative, a mathematical certainty of recurring, cyclical, global cataclysms, completely collapses the illusion of societal stability. The consequences of this knowledge are absolutely profound. If the public understands the timeline is finite and that these planetary resets are cyclical, the entire foundation of modern societal control shatters overnight. Think about it. Long-term debt systems, compliance with wage slavery, and ultimate political authority, they all rely heavily on the masses believing they have a stable, unbroken future ahead of them.
Moving right along to the subterranean survival grid.
But here is the real kicker. The source document suggests the intelligence apparatus is actively preparing for this right beneath our feet. They detail that while the surface population remains completely oblivious, top tiers of the military-industrial complex are constructing a breakaway civilization. They're building a global network of deep underground military bases, or DUMBs, designed explicitly to survive a planetary-scale extinction event, and they are using highly specific, patented technology to get it done.
The engineering behind this is mind-blowing. If you dig a bunker the size of a city, commercial satellites are obviously going to see miles of excavated dirt, right? To do this silently, the sources point to U.S. Patent 3693731A, the nuclear subterrane. Invented by the Los Alamos National Laboratory back in the early 70s, this machine doesn't actually dig, it melts.
Powered by a compact nuclear reactor, this subterrane heats a tungsten penetrator to over 1500 degrees Celsius. It literally melts solid bedrock into magma, which then cools into a pressurized, glass-lined, indestructible tunnel, leaving exactly zero excavated dirt on the surface for anyone to find.
Inside these massive subterranean nodes, and the sources actually cite anomalies reported beneath the Denver International Airport as a prime example of this, they have to build entirely artificial ecosystems. To survive long-term quarantine, they utilize advanced, patented hydroponics to grow massive caloric yields in absolute darkness. We're talking high-intensity LEDs, tapping directly into pristine subterranean aquifers, and recycling 99% of all human waste through closed-loop reverse osmosis.
Now here's where the physics gets truly terrifying. It is one thing to build an underground bunker. It's a completely different thing to survive the sheer kinetic violence of a 30-mile-thick crustal displacement. The rock itself is going to violently shift. So, to survive, the sources state these internal cities must be completely mechanically decoupled from the surrounding granite. They are essentially built as floating submarines right inside the Earth's bedrock.
To pull a feat like this off, the documents point to some insanely specific defensive architecture. The intelligence community allegedly uses massive elastomeric base isolators. Think of them as giant shock absorbers using pendulum mathematics to ensure these subterranean cities survive those apocalyptic kinetic shocks. They pair this with Inconel 625 superalloys to contain nuclear waste and titanium heat exchangers to flawlessly dump thermal exhaust. Basically, the rock around it might break, but the city floats.
The source documents paint a genuinely chilling picture of this hidden operation. The text explicitly states that the architects of the apocalypse do not intend to burn with us. They're hoarding these technologically omnipotent sanctuaries, fully stocked with the genetic material of the planet, completely independent from the surface biosphere, and just waiting for the signal to close the blast doors.
So, as we wrap up this explainer and uncover this leaked forensic audit of Chan Thomas's classified mathematics, the supersonic tsunamis, and the subterranean breakaway civilization, it leaves us with one seriously haunting question to consider. When the mathematical timeline runs out and the crust actually begins to slip, what will you do?